Good morning, KW Prosperity. It is Matt and Mary Beth here with you today.
Good
We
morning.
missed you yesterday, Mary Beth.
Aw, thank you. Thank you for stepping in. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And
God, family business.
we thank Eric and Kieran for stepping in and really adding value to the call. So yesterday, I know you watched the video later, but we really tied up the 9 ways an MREA thinks. So we went through all 9 of the tactics.
Mm-hmm.
But where we left off with think standards and think service, which was page 92, 93, and 94. We covered most of that, but the one piece that we didn't really cover on page 94, and then it leads on to page 95, is really the value proposition piece. And ultimately on page 94, what Gary writes is that the very best real estate agents are able to translate this purpose and the reason people should hire them into a specific set of services that they will provide. This is called the value proposition. So he's essentially laid them out. He says there are 10 specific service areas for buyers and 10 for sellers.
That's
so
right.
that goes on to figure 5 on page 95. Do you want me to read out loud the 10 top service areas for the seller value proposition?
Yeah, sure. I mean, why don't we read through and talk about each one as we go through it? I don't think, So go ahead.
So number 1 is the needs analysis. So that's help clarifying the motivating reasons to sell, and B, determining the seller's timetable.
Sure. So I believe the needs analysis, everything starts with a needs analysis in almost any relationship. Right. So how do you know if you can add value into someone if you don't even know what they value or what they need? Right. I had a class with a gentleman named Rick Jiha once, actually quite a bit. And one of my first classes as a team leader, and it was isolate the objection and figure out what they need. And if you don't know what they need, then how can I help you if I don't even know how I can help you? And so a lot of times we skip over that needs analysis because we just jump right into selling and the presentation. And we have to slow down a bit because the needs analysis will dictate what your presentation needs to be.
And ultimately that's the same with both sellers and buyers. So buyers, the number 1 is also the needs analysis. And really to what you're saying, and we talked about this when we were doing the Shift book, is really understanding the motivations of the buyers and the sellers.
And Matt, where you're going to find that this will show up again will be when we are in negotiating time. When an offer comes in, or when you're in contract and there's some repairs that are asked of the seller, or the buyer has to be willing to not get the money for the repairs that they're asking of the seller, that's when you'll need to go back to this specific conversation. Number 1, needs analysis in both a buyer and a seller relationship.
So number 2 is pricing strategy. So determine the best selling price strategy given current market conditions, and then show the resulting net sheet. So ultimately what they would make when it sells.
So, and with that, I think that now we're in a time that we're very unknown in that we're in a special circumstance. In a normal circumstance, or when we get out of this and we have some consistency as far as the numbers, the indicators that will tell us where the market is headed or how it's behaving. What we can only be sure of, agents, leaders, is we can only be sure of what is today, what is now, what the competition for our seller or buyer is today, and where the pricing is today. And so I learned a long time ago that we don't make the market, we just interpret it. So don't shoot the messenger, but be a messenger. So when you're talking about pricing strategy, we've discussed a few of those in our Shift series, which is pricing ahead of the market, pricing in the market, out of the market, no man's land. And so discussing all of that with your sellers and your buyers to show them how price was gotten to is super important in any market, and especially this one.
Yep, it's important to talk about how you arrived at the price. And then similar with Shift Tactic 8, once you arrive at a price and something is listed, the next 2 important pieces, number 3 and number 4 here, are property preparation and marketing strategies. So ultimately, staging strategies, and we talk about the curbside appeal, making sure the outside looks good, because if the outside looks dumpy, then most likely the inside is going to also be relatively dumpy. So you need to make sure that you're developing a marketing plan and a marketing timetable, and really communicating that to your sellers. That way, they understand what's going to be happening. Because if we learned one thing in the Shift series, and even now early on in the MREA, communication is key. So you need to over communicate and really make sure you're communicating all the necessary information.
And the truth is, communication has always been the number one thing that sellers, buyers, clients are looking for from their agent. It says it, honesty and trust and all of that comes with great communication and relationship. And so that is why people choose you to work with. It's not because of how many homes you've sold or buyers you represented. It really comes down to who you are inside as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just share a little bit with property preparation and marketing strategy. Honesty is very, very important. And then of course you need to have some couth in that.
Yep.
If somebody's house is not well kept up, you just want to, there was an agent that was doing this very well over the weekend in her virtual open house. You really want to sell the benefits. You never want to sell features. You never want to say, well, there's this beautiful chandelier.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't even need the chandelier most of the time because the natural light comes into this area, and at night it lights up that entranceway beautifully. That's
Yep.
selling the benefit. It's the same thing when you're talking about property preparation and marketing strategy. You want them to understand in the eyes of the buyer or seller, depending on their offer or the house, needing to be attracting the other party.
And then I think when we're looking at
Ultimately
number
to number
five,
5.
yep, when we're looking at number 5 and number 6, receiving an offer and then negotiating to sell, ultimately we're looking at evaluating the offers. And I think what can really separate the top agents and the agents who are still getting their feet per se or learning is the ones who can negotiate to sell at a really high level.
I mean, it frustrates me when I've had this as well, is we have an agent who writes offer, and nothing ever sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an agent that's had this happen to you, I would really encourage you to look at your negotiating skills and how you're presenting the offer, how you're presenting the negotiating. So evaluating offers and then negotiating to sell is negotiate counter offers, advise on final terms and conditions. And so when you hire me, you get the best negotiator.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that? Do you have the skills to? There is an art in negotiating. And I would share with you in maybe some of our future classes, we could talk about how to present that offer in the way that, all right, well, if it was $1 million price tag and I'm offering $950, that's 95% of what the seller's asking. And yet it may still not be acceptable to a seller, but I would enter into the conversation with, great news, my buyer's offering 95% of what you're asking.
Yeah.
So we're expecting a counter or what, so there's a lot of tricks to the trade in that I'm sure we could have a class on.
Absolutely. And to your point, see, some of these do overlap between the seller and the buyers, because when you were just talking about presenting the offer, that's number 6 on the buyer side. But ultimately, that's really the same in both.
Well, and it's the same because when you're the agent who now has to go to that seller, and that's why, everybody has their own style. As when I was taking listings, I would always have my agent, my sellers choose to have all offers delivered through me.
Mm-hmm.
Even if an agent wanted to present their own offer, I knew my client well enough to present the offer on behalf of the buyer who is graciously writing us a handwritten, a in writing offer. I felt I was more skilled than the other side because they didn't know my client to present it the way that my client needed to hear it, so that A, they wouldn't be offended, because if it wasn't asking price, they might be offended, and B, that they understood, what the temperature of the market was, even though this offer was coming in maybe not where they want it to be.
Yep.
So when you are the listing agent or the buyer's agent, negotiating is extremely important, and you should know where you need to be in that.
Absolutely. And then once something goes under contract, really the last three pieces, pre-close preparation, closing, and post-closing, I think all kind of tie together because that's going to really depend on if you're an individual agent, what are your contract to close systems that you have in place for yourself? And if you have a team of
That's right.
agents, who are the people, what are the tools, what are the systems, who are the leverage that you have to ultimately get you from contract to close and making sure everything is streamlined and done.
Now, I just want you to have a timeout for a second. When somebody says, "Oh, you're a real estate agent? Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, you just look for houses, you show houses, I mean, that sounds fun. There are a lot of things. We just had like a 15-minute discussion on what you do for sellers.
Hmm.
And so we're not doing a great job at explaining to buyers and sellers what we actually do. Because what they see is they see the sign in the yard, they see the marketing on the listing, and they see whether or not you sold the house. That's what they see. They don't see all of this that we just spoke about, which is sharpening your axe and all of these skills and classes and maybe some just straight up pure talent, right?
Yep.
That we use. So, and then moving on to the 10 services for the buyer value proposition, it's not much different.
No. I mean, the differences are number two, which is really making sure you get pre-qualified or pre-approved, which we've talked about numerous times on all of our mortgage calls and why that's important. Uh, and number three, neighborhood information. So um, ultimately, when we were talking in the Shift series, having some of those like best buys, like lists or things that you can offer to your clients that maybe that will separate you from the other agents because you have kind of an exclusivity or you have something
Yeah,
or you are good at communicating the information, whether that's using the Keller Williams mobile app and encouraging people to
yeah.
save properties or favorites and all of that type of stuff.
Or you're an agent that literally puts it in their calendar
Yep,
that goes out and previews homes in a specific neighborhood. That's
absolutely.
something else that, you know, just growing up in the industry, that was something that I did on Wednesdays. Wednesday mornings was go out and preview. Or if a house came on that was, in one of my buyers' search criterias and it
Yep.
hit the market first thing in the morning before I even went to the office, I was making a preview of that property. And so now, while we're in a different time and we are not going out to look at houses for our clients as much as maybe we were before, we still can virtually experience them without, without just going, hey, here's the list of 5 houses. Which one do you want to see? Really going deep on all those houses and understanding what's the tax structure, when was
Yep.
it last sold, and really doing a little extra legwork for our clients. Also, you can do some extra research to see what amenities does the city offer or the township offer, the county, are there parks around? And so, you could just be a shower of houses,
Hmm.
or you can really be a student of the market.
Absolutely, and I think you can't say that better. You're not just a tour guide to show properties. You're really offering a lot of other services.
Now,
Um,
I will tell you, please be careful with your opinions, because your opinions, when somebody used to tell me everybody's got opinions, they're like
yes, go
armpits.
based on facts. Use factual information.
Yeah.
Um, so really, the last part of this section on the how the MREA thinks, and I don't know that we need to go through this whole chart on page 96, figure 7, but it's really the difference between a functionary and a fiduciary. Ultimately, a true fiduciary is somebody who places their client's interests ahead of interests of all others, so even their own. So whereas a functionary is really kind of low level, uses low skills, more of a receiver of information, not a person who's proactive. You
Hmm.
want to make sure that you are the fiduciary. You're the one who interprets the data and is able to communicate that data to others. You really have a partnership with the people that you're working with, and ultimately that you're irreplaceable and that your level of service is one that people want to come back to or refer other people to you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's the difference of an order taker versus somebody that's truly working for you.
Yep.
Employee mindset versus somebody who goes above and beyond.
Yeah, the functionary
It's
does the
like
job.
walking into Walmart versus walking into Nordstrom. How about that? Walmart
Correct.
versus Nordstrom.
Yeah. The functionary is the one that's going in to just do the job to get it done. The fiduciary is the one who's actively trying to make the experience as amazing as possible and really putting the clients first.
And that's the key legal word, is that the interest of the client is first.
So I think we can shift out of that part of the chapter and move to pages 97, 98, and 99. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and really, I'm very passionate about this section. It's kind of a short chapter, a short section, yet I think once I truly understood the 80/20 principle, it really changed my work habits, and I think it really changed who I am, which ultimately is saying the 80/20 principle is basically saying that 20% of your activities yield 80% of your results.
Mm-hmm.
So Gary uses the example in here where he says Vilfredo Pareto in 1906 noted that 80% of the farmland in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. He also then said that as an avid gardener, he noticed that 20% of the pea pods in his garden yielded 80% of his harvest. And so that was how this principle ultimately grew.
Yeah.
But this is also looking at now, uh, in our world, if you're focusing on your 20% of your 20% activities, they're going to yield
Mm-hmm.
80% of your results. So sometimes when we're in a rush to respond to an email or we're in a rush to do different things, sometimes you have to ask yourself, okay, is that part of my 20%? Is that going to actually be a dollar producing activity?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important to understand as agents what your 20% is.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
ultimately,
it ties in very much to the next book, which is The One Thing,
correct.
and prioritizing. What I have here from many years ago is that it says the difference between business and busyness,
Hmm.
identifying the difference between the business activities versus the things that make you feel busy and
Yep,
yet may not be actually generating business. So,
absolutely. Well, and I think until you truly buy into this principle, you're not going to earn as much money and you're not going to be as successful as you can be because you're still focusing on things that really don't matter. Um, and what,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, yes. And so we take the 80/20 principle and it applies to a lot in our life. I mean, we could take it to any organization, and you will look at if there's 100 people in the organization, there are 20 that are highly, highly engaged,
Yep,
that are literally creating 80% of the production of that group.
yep,
If you were to look at the activities of your business and say, okay, I did 10 transactions. Of the 10 transactions, where did the lead sources come from? And I guarantee you 80% of them, somewhere around that, 70 to 80% of them is probably going to come from one major lead source,
hmm,
which in our world, most likely it is sphere of influence,
yep,
and then through technology. Yet, so if you were to look at the business, if I focus my energies on what yielded me the 20% of my transactions, and I do more of that and more of that and less of what gave me the 80% of my results,
yep,
then I'm going to get more of it. So everything should be tracked, and then you'll start to see where that 80 and that 20 are showing up. If we go even deeper, there's a 20 inside the 20. Now, I want most of us are real estate agents and can understand this. Of all the licenses that we have in National Association of Realtors,
hmm,
or NAJAR, New Jersey Association of Realtors, or even just the local board, or even just our offices,
yep,
and we take a look at the 80% of the business is being done by probably 20 and 30% of our rosters. But
yep,
if we look inside of the top 20, which is about the top 5%,
yep,
that's where we see exponential quantum leap like production compared to an average.
Yep.
So I could look at 80/20 in so many different ways. But like you said, you have to be convinced and convicted that it's just going to show up.
Absolutely. And I think kind of to what you're touching on is we're looking at the 20% for a realtor. And ultimately, Gary in this book is saying that the 20% of the millionaire real estate agents, so of the people he interviewed, are the three L's, which we talked about a little bit, and we'll dive a little bit more in now. It's leads, listings, and leverage. And then I think to your point is even within those subsets, there's a 20% within that 20%. So in the Shift series, I forget which tactic it was, but we had asked you guys to take out a sheet of paper and write down your 10 lead sources. And then you'd go back and see, okay, well, how many leads did I get from each source? And then you'd look at the top three. And of those top three, those are the ones you're now going to focus on to generate more leads. So I think within the 20% of the leads, listings, and leverage, there's also, to your point, an additional 20% inside of that.
That's right.
What
Some
I
would
want to
even
highlight,
argue there's a 20% inside the top 20%, which gives you the 1%, right?
absolutely.
And so if you were to look at 1 to 100, you're talking about 5 of these people are doing something so much bigger than the top 20 of them versus the whole 100.
Absolutely.
And I would just with agents, leaders, agents in our industry, contacts, lead generation is your top 20%. Without the ability, I think Chris Cormack, CC Sells, writes, without leads, we wouldn't be in business. So if we were to identify, could you live without leverage? Could you do business without leverage? Yes. Could you do business without listings? Yes.
Yeah.
Can you do business without leads? No. And so if you're an agent who is just starting up your business, hey, if you got 5 buyers to work with and you don't have any listings, that's okay. Those buyers, I bet you 3 of them have somewhere to live and they need to sell that, or have a friend that needs to sell. So you lead generation, number 1.
Yeah, well, and I think that's why sequentially when you're going through this, he first talks about, of the 3 L's, pages 99, 100, and 101, leads are the most important aspect of the business. So you're going from leads, then the most important thing of those leads are seller listings, which is going to listings, and then you get the leverage. The 2 points.
So to that point though, Matt,
Yeah.
what you just said is there may be a decision that you make in your business at a point where you start looking at, hey, I got 15 buyer leads working over here. I got 5 sellers that I could list. You don't treat them all equally. The 15 and the 5 is not 20. I'm going to take a look and say, I'm going to treat my 5 listings like gold. They're now in my top 20%. And of the 15 buyers, what 3 to 5 of them are now going to be treated as my top 20% of leads I'm going after.
Yeah.
And then you'll leverage through, because your next subset is going to be those other 10 buyer leads that you're not going to lose, but you may not have the time and you may need to leverage through another being or a system to
No, and I was looking for a specific quote because I know it was like you can have one seller listing for, I think, 5 or 6 buyers that you're working with. So it is more advantageous to work with the sellers. The 2 things in the lead generation section that I like that he highlights, especially when you're in a shifting market, you need to understand whether you're lead receiving or lead generating. So are you the type of person who is dependent on referrals from other people, or are you actively going out to lead generate for new business? Because people in a shifting market who have been reliant on lead receiving, you're going to feel a little bit of a pinch right now with that. And then the second piece real quick is just that Gary's, one of the first things he asks in a consulting meeting is, do you have enough leads that if you close them properly, you'd be reaching your goals? And if the answer is yes, then you know that they have a lead conversion problem. And then the skill that they need to level up on is ultimately their lead conversion skills.
You're identifying the problem if you have enough leads. But you said something there before that about generating the leads. What was it?
Lead receiving versus lead generating.
Sure. So if maybe some of you are not clear on what that means,
Yep.
lead receiving would be that you're buying leads and maybe you have a subscription with one of our third-party vendors and they are supplying you with leads.
Yep.
Lead receiving could be that you posted ads out on Facebook and you are now receiving inquiries back. Okay, so those are all lead receiving. Lead generating is you are actively calling,
Prospecting.
Zooming, texting, emailing, direct mailing, meeting in public, and you are asking for the business. So there's two different ways. And somebody I was talking to yesterday said, well, do you have any leads? And I said, it's so interesting because in the last few years, our business has changed so much that there are no more leads. People don't need to drive around and look at signs and call you off signs. They're not doing that.
Yep.
Most people are using some sort of platform to go ahead and do their searching and find their homes. And so are you putting yourself out there and are you getting into your sphere of influence and asking for the business? Because the chances are, if you're not doing the lead generation through your social media platforms and whatnot, somebody else is. And if your buyer is in that error where that's how they're searching, which, guys, it's not just millennials.
Yeah.
If my mom were to go buy a house and she is 70, if my mom were to buy a house, she's looking online. She's looking through my app. I can see her looking through my app.
Yep. Yep.
So, I just want you to understand that every agent out there needs to hear this message that you need to be out there available through your social platforms. Yet if you're not picking up the phone or reaching out personally through Messenger, text messaging, emailing, phone calling to ask specifically for the business,
Yep. Yeah.
You may be watching your career slip out through your fingers.
Absolutely. And I think this might be a good place to pause for today because it's almost 11:30 and pages 101 and 102 talks about the many virtues of seller listings. So all the ways that you can really, so I don't want to rush through that.
No.
So I think tomorrow we'll pick up on page 101, which are really
I have a big
listings.
L on my page.
Yep.
Looks like a very important page.
So we'll go through that, and then if time permits, we'll move on to the 8 goal categories of the MREA. So what you should be.
Let's do that.
Goals versus actual. So we'll do the seller listings, and then we'll move into the 8 goal categories, and we'll continue on. I hope everyone who's watching on Zoom and on Facebook Live and your watch party is getting value from this, and we'll continue to bring it.
Yeah, we'd love for you guys to ask us questions or feel free to get on and share with us. I do want to make a point that we are through the first 100 pages of the MREA, and the MREA is almost 400. It's about 350, 315.
Yeah. What I would also say, we're probably we went, I think, at a really good pace through those first 100 pages. Things kind of slow down a bit in the middle as we're going into the economic model, lead gen model, budget model, all of the models. So, we're going to definitely dive deeper in on those because those are going to be very important to get good information from.
Sure. And we'll be doing some screen sharing and, we're open to do some one-on-one consulting around the economic model, especially coming out of this pandemic. So
we got a lot of fun things coming your way.
Woo!
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. See you tomorrow.
Bye.